Hello and welcome to Bastionland Broadcasting, where today we are doing a very special event that I thought of today, and it is all to do with procedural generation, random tables, rolling stuff up. It's a big part of running RPGs. I've spoken about them a lot, and I'm not going to repeat everything I've said in praise of like random content before, but I think in short, I find for me, it's a really good way to kind of spark that kind of improvisation that's kind of at the core of like running a game. So last week I was looking at 2400 games, and I'll be coming back to them a little bit later on. But I was also reading through Traveller because I picked up. It's essentially classic Traveller. It's the 1981 revision, so I'm sorry it's not quite 1977 original. But I've been reading through that, and I've never been so conflicted on a game. And there's a blog post coming about it, talking about it in a bit more detail. But there are bits of it that I absolutely love, and there are bits of it that make me they just repel me straight away. And there's lots of bits of it that I'm really like torn on. So the bit that I was messing with was that I was messing around with the world creation system in Traveller, and that sort of got me thinking about other systems that do this, and I thought, why not talk about them a little bit today? And we're going to make 5 planets, so I'm going to need to speed things up. We're going to have about 10 minutes on each planet, if my maths is correct. Some of them will take longer than others because some systems are more involved, and the first one that I wanted to talk about, well, these are going to be our 5 planets. So we have planet C, planet T, planet S1, S2, and A. The letters might give you a clue as to where this is going. Cosmic Highway is one of the 2400 games by Jason Tocci, and last week I did a full sort of look through all these, so I won't repeat myself, but essentially it's a pamphlet, like a one-sheet thing that's got a system, it's got character creation, and it's got some tables on the back. And this is one approach to sort of world creation, is to just have, essentially, it doesn't even really have planets, it just has locations, like 20 locations. So I am going to be running Cosmic Highway tomorrow, actually, at my local game group, which is really exciting. It'll be my first time running 2400, so I'm very excited about that. But the locations that come out, they're very kind of packaged and ready to go. Even though they're just one sentence, they're designed to have like a lot of flavour in there. So I've got real organic dice with me today, and a 1 is not a great, well, it would not be a great start in some games, but I've rolled myself a 1. So the location that we get for our first planet using 2400 is Brahe's Moon. Bad atmosphere, good soil. So we can rename that. Now, that's all you get in this system. But when I'm running it tomorrow, I'm going into it with no prep. I'm trying the whole zero prep thing, which I've never done it like completely zero prep before. I've done very low prep. And with this one, I had kind of thought of some things, but I've tried to not prepare even like an opening situation in advance. So it might all fall apart, but I really want to lean into this procedural generation. So if we have further questions about Brahe's Moon, it does have a system, or rather it has a sort of luck roll built into this system where you roll a die, and 1 or 2 is really bad, 3 or 4 is kind of mixed, and 5 or more is a success. So I'm kind of thinking we can use that to mean yes, no, or maybe. So yes on a 5+, maybe on a 3 or 4, and no on a 1 or 2. So I could ask some questions about Brahe's Moon. So I could say, has it got a big, is there a major settlement there? And I rolled a 5, which means yes. So it does have a significant settlement. And I might ask, I'm not going to go too deep into this. So I might ask a question about the settlement. I might say, is the settlement kind of... I'm picturing it being kind of a lawless settlement. Am I right? 2, no, it's not lawless. So I'm going to say it's actually like sort of rigidly regulated. And that is what we get. It doesn't give us any more details. It doesn't tell us what that good soil is used for. It doesn't tell us why the atmosphere is bad, but it pushes you in a certain direction. You know, you're already thinking good soil means there must be like some kind of farming operation, but bad atmosphere means that I'm picturing like big domes with sort of farms underneath. It tells you that it's a moon, but it doesn't tell anything about the composition of the planet. But you can kind of make some, when I say planet, I mean obviously moon. But you can kind of make some assumptions when you see that it's a moon as to like how it's going to be. And yeah, that's what we're getting from Cosmic Highway. Now, at the other end of the scale, the OG. Well, is it the first sci-fi RPG? Was Star Frontiers kind of around the same time? Someone even older than me in the chat can tell me the answer to that. But the Traveller, I'm not going to do my entire review of Traveller because I'm so conflicted on it, and I'm so torn. I hadn't really read it properly until like last week, and I was really excited to read it because there were a lot of things that I'd heard about that I liked. Like I liked the idea of, you know, your character generation, the life path thing was interesting. I liked the sound of little bits of the setting, about kind of it being quite gritty and kind of low sci-fi in some ways. And I liked the sort of the idea of it being quite improvisational from what I'd heard. But the rules don't necessarily reflect that. But one of them that does is this world creation. Now this is completely the other end of the scale to Cosmic Highway. Cosmic Highway will just spit out a location straight away. This involves like maths, and we're quite lucky because here it's just like addition and subtraction. Really, there's other bits of Traveller that involve square roots and so on. So we're quite lucky here. So we're making a Traveller planet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it relatively quickly and then talk about the process a little bit sort of in hindsight. So if this doesn't make sense, don't worry. It's like learning a language, and I'm not fluent in it yet, but I have learned enough to converse in this language. So we're going to check what type of starport there is. I roll a 10, which means it's an... Wait, hang on. Let me double check. Yep, it is just a straight. There's little modifiers hidden everywhere. So most things are a 2d6 roll, but then there'll be a little footnote that says, "Oh, don't forget -3 if this." So it's a Class E starport, which means it's crap basically. I think it's basically a petrol station. So we'll put an E at the start of our string of numbers that's going to make up our planet. Apologies if you've played Traveller, but this is all very new to me, and I do find it quite kind of novel. So naval base. Do not roll if it's a C, D, or E, or X. So we don't have a naval base. Scout base. There's no chance of a scout base. Is there a gas giant in this system? There is a gas giant. This is not a gas giant. It just means there is a neighbouring gas giant to this planet. And now we can move on to the other factors. Planetary size is 2d6 - 2, so that I make that 2. So we put a 2 there. Atmosphere is 2d6 - 7 plus size, so this is 2d6 - 5. So we have an atmosphere of 1. Hydrographics, i.e. how much water is there, is again 2d6 - 7 plus size, so it's 2d6 - 5 is going to be another 1. Oh no, see, I rolled this hydrographics thing and I missed all these modifiers here. If atmosphere is 0, well, you know what, I'm going to stick with the roll that I've made because life's too short. Population, 2d6 - 2. It's got a population 3, this will all make sense. Well, it won't all make sense soon, but it will all at least have some context soon. Population is... No, sorry, government is 2d6 minus 7 plus population. So that's 2d6 minus 4 gives me 1. Law level will be 2d6 minus 6. Law level is 0. And then, so this gives us our kind of, we have our starport code, and we have our 6-digit universal world profile. And then we're going to have a final number, which is our tech level. And the tech level is 1d6 plus all the modifiers from this table. So because it's size 2, we get plus 1. Because it has atmosphere 1, we get plus 1. We don't get anything from our hydrographics. We get 1 from our population, and we get 1 from our government. So it's 1d6 plus 4 gives me a tech level of 8. Now we are done with just making numbers now. Now we're going to actually look at what this means. Because when I started looking through Traveller and I saw that planets were represented by like this string of numbers, my first thought was like, that's clearly bullshit, because that's such a huge, like, it feels like a huge obstacle to get into the game. It's like, no, you've got to learn. It's like learning to read music or something, isn't it? You've got to like learn this, essentially a new language to sort of decode this. But it's not too bad, and once you get it, it is kind of, I hate to say it, it is kind of useful. Personally, I would change a lot about this system to make it a little bit more intuitive, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily just go from like low to high. So for instance, we'll see as we get on, but like from atmosphere, like a high atmosphere score doesn't necessarily mean a good atmosphere. And same with government, that the government, I can't quite work out what the scale kind of represents. It's kind of like centralization, I guess. But anyway, let's look at our planet T. So it has an E-class starport. Oh, it's not even a petrol station. It's just a marked spot of bedrock with no fuel, facilities, or bases present. Cool. So you're starting to beg the question, why would the players come here if there's not even like a refueling capability? And you might think that's a negative thing in a system, but I actually like a sort of procedural system that spits out these weird, not inconsistencies, sort of like contradictions. If I spend all that time to generate a planet and it tells me, oh yeah, and I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's just Mercury, it's just a rock and it's hot, then it's not that interesting. But if it gives you a contradiction, or it gives you something unexpected that you have to explain, something that doesn't make sense, then coming up with that explanation often sort of creates the interesting thing about that planet. So yeah, we know that it doesn't have a good starport. Size 2 means that it's like tiny. I will try very quickly to look up what that means for gravity, but that's in a different section and it's not in the same PDF. I can't find it, but it's basically going to be low gravity world. It has a trace atmosphere, 10% water. I mean, we kind of cheated the system slightly. It should have been 0 actually, because of that modifier that I missed. So we'll honour the system. So it's got no standing water. Population 3 is essentially putting 3 zeros after the 1. So that would be thousands of people. So thousands of people live on this tiny rock with a landing strip. And the government. Wait, I forget which comes first out of law level and government. Government comes first. Government is a company or corporation. So governed by a company managerial elite. So essentially there's a company with 1,000 employees on this rock. And the law level is there's no prohibitions. It's like anything goes. And tech level is 8, which is kind of like, I think that's kind of similar to like modern day. Sorry, I thought there was a better summary of tech levels. So we get laser carbine, vac suit, autocannon, fusion. Yeah, okay, so it's They don't have jump drives, more significantly. So this corporation is kind of stuck on this rock, essentially, from the look of it. They do have a gas giant nearby, so I should say the reason why that's relevant is that's like a source of fuel. So even though this place doesn't have refueling, you can refuel from the gas giant, but it means you've got shitty fuel. And that's our planet. That's what you get out of Traveller. And you get a couple of these trade classifications where, like, if certain conditions are met, then you give it a certain keyword. So like this would be a desert world because it has no standing water. I think it would be like a non-industrial, and so non-agricultural worlds have an atmosphere of 3 or less, hydrographic percentage of 3 or less, and a population of 6 or more. So it's not a non-agricultural world because there's not enough population. So we don't need agriculture. So it's not considered non-agricultural. And it is considered non-industrial. So they don't produce anything. Is that right? Population of 6 or less. So it's not industrial, it's a desert world, there's a corporation there. It brings questions to mind. It makes you have to work on this. Traveller doesn't like help you out all that much. It gives you some weird stuff and you have to kind of work it out. But I do kind of like it in a way. And there are like online generators that will do all the rolling for you and just spit out the numbers and kind of put them on a map, which is nice. I could see myself using something like this. Again, I really want to like house rule what some of these numbers mean, but you could still use like the raw codes. So I generated this one randomly earlier, and this is another example of like a world that leapt out at me, where you've got another tiny world, like a desert world, but it's the capital of the sector, and it has population A, which is, I think. So A would be, sorry, I should say this is hexadecimal because of course it is in Traveller. So A represents 10. So this one actually has 20 billion people on this tiny planet. And it has tech level F, which is like the highest one. So again, it seems like it's created like a weird contradiction, but it means you have to like come up and explain it. Come up with explanations for it, and I think that's kind of cool. So I could talk a lot about Traveller. I'm still working out where I stand on it, but you know, say what you want. That's the planet we've got, and it doesn't even give you a name. That's the biggest kick in the teeth. So we'll steal one of these names. Some of the names on here are dreadful. We're going to go for Olympia, why not? So those are the two extremes, and we've got a couple of other ones that I want to look at that are, I think it's fair to say, I know at least one of these is sort of probably pretty directly inspired by Traveller. If I could ever track down the author to actually have a conversation with them, I would love to talk with them, but they're kind of my hero because they're like a proper hermit and you never hear from them, which is like, that's what I aspire to. And it starts with that number by Kevin Crawford, which a lot of people kind of hold up as like kind of the holy grail of like procedural sci-fi game, because it's got such a huge focus on like randomly generating like planets and sectors and stuff. However, the system that it uses is kind of like a kind of basic D&D system with levels and stuff, and for me that's not really what I want out of sci-fi. So I wouldn't ever use this by the book, but the random tables at the back are pretty great from what I've seen of them. And the main way that it does this is, it's something that I hadn't consciously stolen this, I should say. I own one Kevin Crawford book, which is, I forget what it's called. Is it Silent Legions? The one that's like sort of occult kind of investigation. And that has a similar sort of thing where it has these tags, which are little descriptions, and whenever you're generating like a location, you will generate 2 of these tags. And combining 2 of them is more interesting than just having 1. But having 3 is a bit much. And that's kind of what I do with like Spark tables, where I have, 2 tables next to each other that you can kind of mash up together. So we're going to do that. So I've got 68, which is Psionics Worship, and 52, which is Night World. So Night World and Psionic Worship. So interestingly, these tags don't really necessarily tell you much about. Some of them refer to the actual planet itself, but usually they're to do with like the society. And then if you go to each one, and I should say this PDF is free. This is like the free version of Stars with that number. So if you want some random tables, it's a great source. So Night World, the world is plunged into eternal darkness. The only life derives its energy from other sources. Most flora and fauna is voraciously eager to consume other life. So this kind of fits in with the psionic worship. I'm imagining like the mind worms from Alpha Centauri, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. And you have like some enemies, some friends, some complications, some things, and some places to kind of spark ideas. It's really good. It's really handy. And then psionic worship. I've heard people sort of recommending this for if you're running like a solo game, for just sort of procedurally generating things really quickly, and it seems like it would work for that. So this world is one of the few that have managed to redevelop the basics of psychic training. Oh, hang on. This is Psionic Academy. That's not us. Yeah, Psionic Worship. Right, these natives view psionic powers as a visible gift of God or sign of superiority. If the world has a functional psychic training academy, psychics occupy almost all major positions of power. So, psychics are considered like sort of holy, I guess. Okay, that's cool. I feel like you could run with that in like coming up with some ideas. But this does actually go a little bit further, where as well as these tags, you can also just roll like some simple 2d6 rolls to get actual details about the planet itself. So atmosphere, 9. It's a breathable mix. Temperature, 8. It's temperate. This is where I feel like it's taking some inspiration from Traveller. I know Traveller didn't invent space, but it feels like this is like a very simplified, streamlined version of that kind of that system that's in Traveller. 5, no native biosphere. So this is interesting because some people will tell you that when you're rolling on a random table and you get a result that, because we were thinking about these like mindworm type things, and some people will tell you, well, you can ignore it if you want, and I agree 100%. But I think this is a good example of that kind of contradiction where you're thrown off the path that you were going to take. So I was going to just rip off Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri mindworms, but it's dark. But now I'm forced to think, well, if there's no native life, how do I fit that in with this kind of psionic thing that I was looking at? So it could be, you could say that they're like, the life was brought here. So who would bring these kind of psychic, human-eating worms to a planet? Why would they do that? Is it part of the kind of like the religion of this place? And population. So this might give us a little bit of help as well. 8, several million inhabitants. I will say these tables are very heavily weighted to the middle. Someone smarter than me can say what the odds are of rolling 6 to 8 on 2d6, but it's pretty high. So you are going to get those these results quite often. So the fact that worlds kind of default to several million inhabitants kind of tells you that it's not quite what I was anticipating. tech level 5, which means early industrial age tech. So we've got some interesting stuff going on. So it's a night world, psionic worship, imported life. So imported psionic life forms, we said. And it's early industrial tech. Millions of people. It gives you just like ideas, and it does require some work, but not nearly as much work, I would say, as as Traveller. And you can go further. You can have bases and so on, but I do want to move on to the next one, because the next one again occupies like a really nice kind of middle ground between the two, and that is Starforged. Now this is just the preview edition. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for for showing this. So it's by Sean Tonkin, who did Iron Sworn, and this is the kind of the sci-fi version, and it kickstarted I think last year. And the preview, this is the most recent preview PDF that's out, and the whole thing with Iron Sworn is that you can run it solo, you can run it without a GM. There's a big focus on being able to generate content with these kind of oracles. And with Iron Sworn, I bought the book and I tried to play it, and I got a little bit kind of. I think it just wasn't quite for me. I can see why people love it. I can see why certain people would really love it. But in the same way as Blades in the Dark, I feel like I can see that it's very clever, and I can see that it's very well designed, and everything is kind of there for a reason, but it's just a little bit much for me. So I've, for a long time, been trying to like sort of make my own stripped down version of Iron Sworn. And the one thing I would say, though, is the tables in there are fantastic. So if you ever feel like just getting it for the tables, I can 100% recommend it. And as you might expect, Starforged has random planets. So, everything in this book, every table, I think, is a D100 roll. So I will break up my D100s. And much like with Traveller and Stars Without Number, we're just kind of working through a list. But this time it's broader strokes, but I think it kind of hits a really nice sweet spot here. I will drink this coffee and then we will actually do it. Apologies, very thirsty work making these planets. So I have got 14. A desert world. You can click through because everything's hyperlinked. I didn't pick up the physical version of this, and I'm kind of regretting it because there was like a spiral bound version of like just the random tables, I think, and that would have been a very, very cool thing to have. So desert world, a pitiless planet of searing heat, blowing sand, and sun-baked rock. What's the atmosphere like? 96. Ideal. Wow. So, perfect atmosphere. Not even just like breathable, it says ideal, which is interesting to have with a desert. But let's see what we get. So, we need to decide if we're in the terminus, the outlands, or the expanse, which are like the different points of the galaxy. I guess we'll go outlands just because we're in the middle. Number 6. There are no settlements here. What does it look like observed from space? And it says roll once or twice. So, of course, we're going to do 2. So we have 72. Vast plateaus. I have to say I'm a little bit uninspired by that. I mean, it's a desert world. But you can see vast plateaus, I guess. And 91 is... Aha! So this is descriptor and focus, which is one of the other oracles, one of the sort of the more general oracles. So we roll a descriptor and a focus. Wow, a 100. Still shocks me when you get a 100 on a D100. So I have violent and 17. Violent connection. Okay. So that's our prompt, violent connection. I'm just going to put it in. And then we'll see if it makes more sense when we come back to it. And then what do they see when they actually get to the planet? 40. Rampaging whirlwinds. So that's a bit more evocative. And 30. Petrified forest. So we break up the desert a bit. Violent connection. So maybe this has a connection to a violent era in history. Maybe it was a world that was kind of... Because it has an ideal atmosphere, but it's just desert, I'm imagining maybe it was like blasted clean, like by like some kind of war. So utterly destroyed by orbital weapons, let's say, for now. So the atmosphere is still intact, but the sort of the ground of the planet has just been like blasted clean. Life 22, none. Sample names. Oh, we didn't name the last one. We'll go back to stars with that number because it does have some names. The names. Saffron is a good name. Naming planets is, I swear, it's harder than like naming places. I think with fantasy places, I've got to a point where I can just kind of make something up. But with planets, I find it really difficult because the temptation is to use like a sci-fi word, but then it often just comes out like a string of letters. So I do like using either existing names or just using like real world mythology names, and then people can argue about why is this planet named after that, or all they want. Okay, so I think that's what we get from the planet, but then you get some planet-side peril or opportunity. If we did have a settlement, we could have seen what it's like. So maybe let's pretend for a minute that there was an orbital settlement here. So you can say the first look at it has significant structural damage. So that kind of matches the theme that we've got going. 26. Oh, and it was an automated response. And then what authority do they have? So you would think this is going to be low. 51. Fair. So maybe this station is still like armed, but it's like automated. It's like an automated station sort of intended to just keep people away. Okay. Automated orbital fortress, let's say. So that is Starforged. Out of the two, it's not really fair to compare it to Stars with that number because it uses much shorter descriptions, which you might think are kind of more up my street, but then occasionally it means you get one that's kind of a little bit uninspiring. But the beauty of this is you're not just rolling single results. And if you get one that's uninspiring, just move on to the next one and you'll get something that is a bit more exciting. So Stars with that number, we did miss planet names. Don't be telling me there's no planet name table. Well, you know what? Place. Here we go. 61. Oh, so we can choose between Arabic, Chinese, English, Greek, Indian, Japanese, Latin, Nigerian, Russian, Spanish. Okay, so we'll go with, you know what, we'll go with Greek. And we rolled a 61. Sorry, it's very small text. Lyros is this world. And again, maybe I'm sure that means something in Greek, but this is the kind of thing that will just get forgotten by me because it doesn't mean anything to me. But yeah, weirdly, like Olympia is more memorable just because it sounds a bit like Olympia. And Brahe's moon, you know, presumably a reference to the astronomer. saffron being just a plain word. I'm very kind of realistic at the table. I would rather like remember it and have the players remember it rather than have some deeper, meaningful reason as to why it's named a certain way. For how I play the game, anyway. So that was Starforged. And finally, if you've been following the blog at all, you will have seen that I've been messing around with this system, Ask the Stars. And the whole point of this was Ask the Stars goes back a long way. It's this kind of trying to make a sort of 2d12 oracle that would give you yes and no answers, but also give you these kind of prompts, almost like tarot, to come up with your own kind of answers to any questions that you could throw at it. And I've been batting this around for a while now. And then after looking at 2400, I kind of thought, well, could I turn this into something that fits that kind of 2400 format where it's a single sheet of paper? And there's a whole blog post about this, so I won't repeat it all, but essentially I wondered if I could do like a number of modules. So intergalactic is kind of your making a crew and then traveling to orbital bases, it's sort of assumed, doing some jobs, trying to make some money. It's 100% my knockoff of 2400's Cosmic Highway. 100%. I admit to taking that from Jason. But you know, we joked that he felt like he'd taken things from me, so it's all back and forth. But then today I've also done. We had intergalactic, so of course we had planetary, and this is kind of your for going down to the planets. So I wanted to see if this holds up, and I'm not going to be comparing it to these systems because this is literally I did this today, so these entries all need tidying up. But I wanted to see if I could, wanted to see how it holds up. So, worlds. So, unless noted, assumptions can be made about the world, and they fit this acronym, BASIC, and this is one of those beautiful moments where I didn't plan this acronym. I wrote these 5 things down in a different order, and then I realised I could spell out BASIC. But yeah, so breather required, agriculture, making sustenance, and a suit required to go outside the airlock. There's an industry there producing for export, and there's some kind of corporate presence. So these are kind of your baseline, and then you can kind of choose one of them to maybe remove, or 2 of them, up to you. And you can ask the stars to kind of get inspiration on that. But this kind of just gives you the assumptions where if you don't roll anything that suggests otherwise, you can assume that you need to be wearing a breather. And you can assume that this world has some way of producing food. So let's just do it. Let's see how it works out. So everything is 2d12 in this system. So what's our atmosphere? 3 and 8. Green debris. So I've gone quite broad strokes here. I didn't want to there are some things like I think there is a reference to like a thin atmosphere, but I didn't want to be kind of literal and scientific. I wanted to be a little bit more not I was going to say impressionistic. I don't know if that's what I mean, but a bit more kind of like how would you describe this world? So having a green atmosphere is something that's going to help you remember it. So and it's got debris kind of floating in its atmosphere. So that's all we know for now, because we're working on the assumption that the atmosphere isn't breathable. We're assuming that you need a breather, and we're assuming that you need to wear a suit. And a green atmosphere is kind of like backing that up. And then the landscape. So what's the actual planet like underneath? 10 and 1. Burning mountains. Okay. So I'm imagining like kind of green fire. And again, the thing that I say with this Ask the Stars system, so that this back page is always the same. So inspiration can be symbolic or literal. So it could be literally be burning mountains. But if burning mountains gets me thinking, and then I end up going down a different route, it says here, your interpretation becomes the truth. So when I was thinking about burning mountains and green debris, and I was kind of imagining like a sort of almost constant like forest fire going on. So I'm just going to put forest fires. Even though we haven't had anything about forest yet, the fact that it's put that kind of spark in there, it becomes the truth as you go. So it's not going to create a sort of, I'm sure Traveller has made some kind of concessions to science. This is not. This is just like, we want to make somewhere interesting. So is there a settlement here? Remember, we can just ask yes or no questions to ask the stars. But we're going to just roll down pretty straight here. So we're going to assume there's a settlement. 7 and 8. A refugee community. So this is where we can ask the stars. So we can ask like a yes or no question. And we might want to ask, are these refugees like from another planet, or are they from this planet here? But whatever we ask, it has to be yes or no. And you don't just roll a single die. I've deliberately made it so you can't just roll one die and get like a 50-50 yes or no. You have to think whether it's likely or not. So we're asking the question, are these refugees from another world? And I think it's likely that they are. I think that would make sense. So I roll 2d12. And because it's likely, I take the higher of the two, which is a 10, which means yes. So you are kind of weighting it towards your assumptions, but you'd be surprised how often these little yes buts and no buts just kind of knock you off course a little bit. Yeah, Ordinal's saying about using this for like journaling games, and yeah, it's I feel like you could use this for like running a game, just with the GM, but I have got sort of one eye on solo play for sure. So we've got a refugee community from off-world. What's the governance like on this planet? 5 and 4. Cybernetic feudalism is one of the wackier combinations that we had here. So we're just going to put it in. So how would like feudalism fit in with like a computer? Because again, it creates like a weird. We'll come back to that, because we might knock it on the head, or we might find some way to make it work. So we also have agriculture and industry. So most worlds will have a way of feeding themselves. What are they making? 7 and 10. Hydroponic molasses. And this sounds to me... Okay. So when you see cybernetic feudalism, I was originally imagining like a computer at the top of this feudalism tree. But when I say hydroponic molasses, that sounds like something like a computer would make. So maybe we take, rather than taking the sort of structure of feudalism, we take the idea of like serfdom and apply it to machines. So maybe these hydroponic machines that make molasses are sort of the equivalent of like medieval serfs. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going for it. Hydroponic molasses produced by computer serfs. We'll come back to that. It doesn't make any sense yet, but it will. So industry. So industry, I'm feeling like this world at the moment, it just feels like it's a place where this refugee have set up to just try and live. So I don't know if they will be making stuff for export. So I'm going to actually ask the stars, and I'm going to say, is this planet producing, does it have an industry for export? And I'm going to say it's not likely. So I'm going to take the lower result. So no, they don't have an industry. So we're leaving that one. Life form. So this I should stress isn't that this is the only life form on the planet, but this is like a notable life form. So what's like a notable life form on here? 4 and 6. A domesticated scavenger. So my first thought for some reason goes to like pet hyenas. But maybe it's more like a vulture that's like, maybe they're domesticated because they bring back things from the forest fires. I don't know what they'll be bringing back from the forest fire. but we're going to put vulture-like things. Yeah, I'm not seeing them being domesticated for food because we've got this whole cyber serfdom thing going on. And what's the problem here? I mean, this world already seems like it's got its share of problems. 1 and 8, a fuel plot. Sorry, a fuel coup. So someone has sort of seized control of the fuel production on this planet, or the fuel storage. Seizing a coup, maybe by the serfs. So we have a lot of weird stuff going on there. We don't have a name, but we can just ask the stars. So let's just roll 2d12. 8 and 7. The traveller colliding. So what's another word for a traveller? This word is called nomad. And there we go. So it's some weird planets. Yeah, Adam said about the industry, you know, I will roll on the industry table, but we kind of asked the stars, and it said that this planet didn't have sort of an industry. But we'll roll one just to see what we would have gotten. 1 and 2, micro clothing. So I'm thinking like micro fabrics, perhaps more like sort of very light fabrics that are made. Maybe the forest fire is used, this sort of burning forest, maybe something's left there that can be harvested and used to produce kind of a particular type of clothing, some kind of like polycarbon stuff that's left behind when the trees are burnt. So that's our planet from Planetary, and that is available with Intergalactic. If you go to bit.ly/askthestars, these are free at the moment, and I've got a few coming down the line that should be appearing next week. But yeah, I think we've, for better or worse, we've kind of created 5 different worlds. If you forced me to choose, obviously I'm not going to talk about, because you know, Ask the Stars is a bit of a mess. This needs tidying up. I feel like it creates a lot of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily roll on all those tables for a world. I think you might be better just like picking the ones that really fit well together. So I like this thing about the refugee community. I'm not sure about the vultures. I like the hydroponic molasses produced by a computer. And fuel production seized by the computer. I kind of like that as well. So the computer's in charge of the food, but it's also seized fuel production. And this refugee community is just trying to like make a home for themselves. Starforged, I like. I think the thing that I kind of respect about it is that because it's D100, all the tables are kind of weighted towards a certain result, and some of them are really quite heavily weighted. So if we look at sort of, if we imagine that we're in the expanse, let's say, sort of deep space, the desert world, there's a 90% chance that it's no settlement. Furnace world, 95% chance of no settlement. 95%, 90%. So when you're in that section of space, almost every planet you come across is going to be uninhabited. And I think that would create, in a way, that says a lot about me, that I kind of fancy that. I quite like the idea of a game where you explore kind of uncharted space and don't have to deal with people. I'm not sure what you would do, but it sounds quite chill to me. So I like Starforged a lot, and I think it has a nice kind of, it has a bit of a feel of, it feels like there's rules to the creation, whereas Ask the Stars is very wacky and wild. This feels a bit more grounded in a good way. Stars with that number. I like having the 2 tags. I feel like the tables that are used for like population and atmosphere and things like that I think they're good, and again, they're weighted to a certain result, so they do have this kind of feel of the universe having kind of a standard. And I think you would tweak that to your own game, and I think if I tweaked that to how I would like my kind of sci-fi game to go, I think that would be really good. Traveller, I've just got to respect it. The fact that it spits out E210310-8DNI, and I can kind of read that. It took some work, but I respect it. If I was going to run Traveller, I would slightly tweak what these numbers mean. And 2400, it's unfair putting 2400 up against all these big 400 page books, but 2400, if you just need to get to the point, it does a good job. So that is the end of the I've already forgotten the name, the Procedural Planet Pentathlon. 5 planets in 5 different systems. Hope it's been useful to you. As always, if you've enjoyed this, you can keep up to date with everything that's going on with me at bastionand.com, including the latest version of those Ask the Stars leaflets. You can also stay in touch on the Discord server, which is linked from bastionand.com. And there will be a stream next week, probably at the same time. There's a chance it might move, but I will make sure to post that everywhere. And yeah, thank you for watching, and it's goodbye for now.